Thank you very much, sir. We will have a question. What I'll do is I'll ask, I'll request 2-3 people to ask, and then and let me start off by asking. Let me start off by asking the first question, sir. In the end, you brought out a very important point, logjam in policy making. How are we going to address this? Because this does not seem to have a solution unless, the political parties decide that there are certain things that they will come together on. So I would like to hear your opinion on that. Now let me request Adi, and then Meher also wants to ask a question. So both of them to ask their questions, and then please.
Sir, the international investors seem to be a little put off, and their perception of our country has deteriorated by two initiatives of the tax authorities. One is on transfer pricing, and the other is on retrospective amendments. And I think the UPA government did decide to tackle this so that the perception would improve, but unfortunately not much progress is made. So could we have your view on that, please?
Meher?
So we have an excellent opportunity at the moment to export goods from India. The only thing that we are facing, being in the capital goods and engineering industry, is that we are facing competition from countries like China and Japan, who are giving a lot of long-term funding, 15 to 25-year tenure funding. Whereas in India, we are unable to give this. How can we in industry can help in terms of innovation, in terms of technology, but how can the government assist us in this respect?
See, first, what Chris has asked, that was the last point I was making, that how India's story or India's profile has been hurt by a negative narrative at home, which actually dissuaded the foreign partners. When you're looking at India, there has been concern as to what will be the future roadmap in this country, where there is such a sharp opposition to policy rollouts and the decisions that were made. It is therefore the responsibility or the collective duty of all the political parties. First of all, I for one, this may not be the forum for me to go beyond saying, will continue to tell our people, to hold them to account, because you cannot just run away for the damage done, the words spoken, and in particular when there is not a principled position taken, but a populist position taken or a confrontationist position taken because of partisan politics. And the only way is that industry must give to the major national parties the priority agenda, the social agenda, the manufacturing objectives, the job creation, the skilling, that this is something which should be in the national interest and kept out when it comes to the kind of partisan divisions or logjams that India has seen. Equally important it would be for the political parties to restore credibility when it comes to the functioning of parliamentary democracy by ensuring that the highest forum of discussion and debate functions in a manner that parliaments are expected to, with their informed discussions and debates, where legislations are not held hostage, as we have seen with the insurance bill, we have seen with many important legislations which are pending before the Indian Parliament, many of which will lapse with the end of the tenure of the current Lok Sabha. These questions are quite worrisome. And that's why there has to be a time-bound agenda that in the first 3 months of the next Lok Sabha, the list of the bills which must be passed, which must be cleared. And there has to be honest commitment to be made, which Congress party is committed to, because we've always believed what is in national interest must be taken forward. Irrespective of what the outcome would be, that I leave to the 800 million Indian voters. The things do not remain frozen even for weeks, let alone for months. So we will see. But at the same time, GST is a must for India. That I forgot to mention, which should happen. Now, when Adi was talking about the transfer price and the taxation issues, you are right. Well, first it happened with the SEZs, which was not a correct move. We were opposed to it when the dividend tax was there and when MAT was imposed. We had strongly opposed it, and I remain opposed to that, because there has to be stability and predictability when it comes to any policy. And there is a SEZ Act of the Parliament, and these duties which were imposed should have been aligned with the DTC and not brought in before the DTC becomes a reality. They should have been aligned fully. Second is the issue of transfer pricing. The transfer pricing has been engaging the attention of the government very seriously. And before we left for the United States of America, some circulars were issued on transfer pricing. We thought that they would be meeting the satisfaction of our partners. We do realize now that there are still issues which have been left unaddressed, and that I have been discussing with the Finance Minister, and even the Prime Minister is seriously engaged in this exercise. Hopefully we should find a resolution which is acceptable. Tax issue particularly started with the Vodafone. There have been other cases now. One is the case of Nokia, another case is of Shell. All the three companies, senior executive chairmen have met with us. Well, the revenue side is that it's always difficult when it comes to the taxmen. They would like to collect their taxes where it is due. At the same time, we do not believe in giving even an impression that we believe in or subscribe to the concept of retrospective taxation or retrospective changes. I, for one, am firmly opposed and will continue to oppose it, because this is not correct. It's like the policies must have continuity and predictability. Similarly, the tax regime and the regulatory regime also must have predictability and stability. If there is unpredictability in any of the three, that is bound to have a very negative spin-off which needs to be avoided. But it was not only in the case of India, particularly when Vodafone case came, it was a different matter in retrospective, because I remember discussing this with Chancellor Osborne 2 years ago in UK, and I did ask him a question that suppose you had a similar situation where the businesses are in UK, the assets are in UK, the customers are in UK, but the business is sold off in a tax haven where no FDI comes into your country, like no FDI came into India, and no tax is given. What will be your call on that? And promptly he said, we will tax. And I had to remind also the fact in the retrospective context, because the finance revenue keeps on saying it's clarificatory amendment. It's not retrospective, because this was a gray area left. Now, in case of United Kingdom, I have to tell that they did the same in Padmore case. When they amended the finance act of UK, with effect from, in 2004-5, with effect from 1988, that was the year when their parliament had enacted the Finance Act. In our case, we went back in clarificatory amendment to 61. But this is one issue. The sooner it is settled and put behind us, it would be in India's interest. So these are the three cases. Vodafone conciliatory negotiations were started. It's really sad that they have fallen off the table. I have not gone into the details, but yes, there are issues that perhaps the manner in which it should have been taken forward in the right spirit, it didn't happen, and that is not entirely the fault of the Indian side on this particular case. But has it taken their interest away from India? The answer is no, as we know. They'll continue to remain engaged. But I can assure you that on these issues, we will see to it that there is absolute clarity when it comes to the Congress approach, and also what should be communicated with clarity in our manifesto. Lastly, what Meher has said about the exports and the capital goods, how to become more competitive, it's important, because India cannot remain where we are. We are growing, but manufacturing-led exports have to drive the future growth story. Because if you have that kind of job creation, or skilled jobs for the industry, and there's also going to be a major movement of people to urban areas. It's already there, but we'll have 600 million Indians living in urban areas. So naturally, the industrial activity, manufacturing activity will take a priority. Therefore, availability of credit, and particularly the support to the SME sector, we have ensured that it is there. We have added to the SME sector some more critical sectors for 2% interest subvention, which was done. Then we added another percentage to that, but beyond that, we were not able to take. This is a call which the Finance, the Department of Banking and Financial Services, and the Reserve Bank of India will have to take. I personally am a votary of a differential credit being made available to the manufacturing sector, and particularly for the capital goods, and long-term credit to be made available so that we can make our manufacturing and our exports competitive. We may not be in a position to do what China and Japan have done because they really have money. But surely we can take steps which can make us somewhat more competitive.
Thank you. Now let me request Mr. Diosteli, Sunil, and Deep. 3 questions.
So in today's vote and account speech, the finance minister made a mention about continuation of public-private partnership program for infrastructure sector. Given the current situation in the country, the development companies are completely stressed out. There is no equity capital available, and their balance sheets are so stressed that they have limited interest in funding India's infrastructure. And so it's very difficult for us to imagine that next 2-3 years' time, whether they will come out of this and they will be able to participate in this program. In that case, I think it's extremely important for us to invite more and more foreign direct investment in the infrastructure sector and make sure that the environment is enabling and a very cohesive and congruent approach is taken by all the departments which are actually involved in infrastructure, such as the coal ministry, the environment ministry. All of them need to collectively work on making sure that the environment is conducive for foreign direct investment. Because I do not imagine that in the near future, there will be a lot of interest from private sector to participate aggressively in building India's infrastructure.
Deep.
Thank you, sir. So first and foremost, thank you for engaging with us on the manifesto issue. A couple of days back when we had the opportunity to put across our points. But I do need to make a stress on the sector which is so important, which is not only drives a lot of the job creation in terms of the SME sector, which also leads the exports at 40%, and also the manufacturing, 45% of the manufacturing is by the SME sector. So this contributes a lot more, and it has the largest challenges as well. So we would look forward for, in your manifesto, a very innovative approach which can be resolving the issues across the ministries and come up with things like an aspiration and a vision which you put across for manufacturing. Why not for the SME sector within manufacturing in terms of the growth? In terms of simplification of the labor laws, which owner-manager has to deal with on a very regular basis, and it's consistently tied up to the whole value chain. If the country is to absorb technology at the lower level, it needs to really be matured in a sector so that there's a lot of absorption which happens. Finally, sir, that you have tried in many ways to engage the SME sector in the FDI policy in terms of the multi-brand retail, etc. And you have put many of these issues to say that this is reserved. But somehow even the PSUs, sir, are not responding to those initiatives which were put in the earlier directive. So going forth in the manifesto, can we look forth for a very clear policy on the small and medium sector which will drive a lot of the economy going forth? Thank you, sir.
Mr. Minister, granted that a lot of good things were done in the last few years, whether you look at the Mumbai Industrial Corridor, the manufacturing policy, initiatives in Pakistan, on Africa, the very large number of initiatives have been done. But the stories we hear in the media and the general perception, especially the last few years, has been one of either inaction or negative stories coming out of government/politics. Do you think there is a possibility for us of seeing any time where the major political parties can agree on 5, 10 things which are good for India and working together on them inside and outside of Parliament and then continuing the politicking everywhere else? Is that ever possible?
You see, in a democracy, there would always be, and particularly as diverse as India, different perceptions, different approaches and ideologies. Also, the priorities may differ. But what you have said is very relevant, so I'm taking the last question first. The need of a national consensus where national good and national interest is involved. And to move to this space from a long and painful phase of confrontation to one of consensus will take time. Because right now it is, bitterness is being administered as a daily dose. It is without any respite. But I feel that that should happen, where the senior leadership who have experience and wisdom sit together one day, see what is good for the country. Industry also can play a major role. it's not only the industry means when we talk of SMEs, when we talk of the capital goods sector, when we talk of other various sectors of the bigger industries. It's also the information. Media is part of the industry. And we have discussed it in the past. In CII has to sit with the media leadership too, as to what we want to do. Whether this competition which is there, we've seen this happen elsewhere, but this kind of sudden proliferation may not have taken place even in the developed countries. That has happened here. When suddenly you leaped to 750 odd channels. So many categorized as the news channels, but there is issue of revenue, there is TPP, there are TRPs, and then there is, because as a Commerce Minister, I have TPPs in my head, but TRP. And also this tendency for competitive sensationalization is hurtful. That needs to be checked. I'm all for freedom. But when you have freedom, there is also responsibility which comes with any freedom. As citizens, when we are given fundamental rights, and the fundamental rights given to the citizens are superior. So their right to reputation, their right to liberty, their right to privacy, there are certain issues where the transgressions are taking place in India, and that's why I feel that a dialogue is essential, which would be a criticism to be taken in the right spirit, because other countries have also seen evolutions, but regulatory mechanisms have been put in place. We have seen many sectors where we have moved forward to be in sync with what are the best practices, acceptable best practices elsewhere. And one day India will have to look in that direction too. With regard to what was said earlier, there are two important issues. One was about PPP projects. Yes, PPP projects cannot be wished away. I do agree that because of the stress today, many of the major players who went in for PPP projects in the infrastructure sector are under pressure and may not be in a position to make the same contribution which we were expecting the private sector participation and contribution in PPP projects to go above 35%. We still hope that we are able to turn around the bad situation and take it beyond that. At the same time, there is no alternative to FDI. And I fail to understand not the wisdom, but the lack of wisdom of those who feel that India shouldn't be having FDI. It should be in every sector. Until you become a major exporting, manufacturing-led exporting power of the world, which will happen one day, there's only three ways that you'll have to bring in the funds. That's the FDI, which is the first preferred option. Second is the FII. And third is the ECB. Now that should be the last one. That is also unavoidable. And the fourth route, which we are fortunate, are the remittances by the Indian diaspora, which are the highest for the last 2 years as compared to even China. So I think that it's a point well taken that the Reserve Bank and the government also have to look at it seriously. But we have to ensure that we sustain India's rating amongst the first three as of today and last many years destination for foreign direct investment, and not do anything which creates any doubt or makes investors put their decisions on hold. Cabinet Committee on Investment was set up only for this purpose, because there was reference to coal and environment. Though, mind you, that electricity generation has increased from 112,000 megawatts to 235,000 megawatts. despite all these problems. But if these problems were not there, maybe India would have been better placed. But CCI has cleared projects which have investments of 1,000 crores and above. We're looking now at how to bring it down, the bar, for the projects maybe beyond 100 crores are also looked at, or at least 500 crores. 6 lakh crores worth of projects, or the value of projects, which were blocked or delayed, they have been cleared now. There is more clarity also on the coal blocks. Finally, that will move. The concern has been that even bona fide decisions were made suspect. These issues also will be part of the narrative when we have to address that once the policies are put in place, a transparent mechanism has to be there. I have not found, but for, of course, many tough battles, much difficulty in taking decisions and policy rollouts. And I must say, to the credit of our civil service, contrary to the impression, there are areas where we take decisions and those decisions get rolled out or implemented. So that has to improve. And what Deep said, Deep SME sector has been given very privileged focus in the national manufacturing policy with a lot of incentives. It's one sector which has been given that attention and special dispensation. I hope that will help the SME sector. When we put sourcing from SMEs, it is done with a purpose. Though the opposition is also there, but we made it very clear, even when it comes to the local content, that is a separate issue, that this has to be there for our own domestic capacities, our own industry to grow. And we'll continue to give it a push.